How's everybody doing today? Gosh, are we not the luckiest people or what? Emergency managers, planners, engineers. We come together to do a good thing, and then we get to spend time talking with one another about something that we love. So I feel like I just want to say thank you. This is a great opportunity for me, and I appreciate what we're doing here today. And in thinking about gratitude, I will tell you a funny story. That happened to me. I was talking to my girls. I've got a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old. Oh, she just turned 9. She would kill me if I said 8. She's been 9 for like 4 days, so I should know that. And I like football, and I like the Harbaugh brothers. And they had this thing where they would say, their dad would tell them when they're growing up, boys, who's got it better than we do? And no matter what was going on, they had to come up with the same answer. Enthusiastically, they would say, nobody. And the idea there was to build in gratitude, right? Be grateful for your circumstance. And I thought, well, that's cool. So I'm gonna do that. So I sat him down, and I said, girls, I'm gonna ask, who's got it better than we do? And here's your response. Got it, Daddy, all right, we're good. So I said, girls, who's got it better than we do? And they yelled, everybody. I was like, not quite what I was going for. So let's try it out here. Let me see if I can actually do this. I'm going to ask, the appropriate response here is nobody. So, NEC 2016, who's got it better than we do? Nobody. All right, thank you very much. These kids, they mess with your confidence. So my name is Vance Taylor, and I am the chief of the Office of Access of Functional Needs at the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services. And I wanted a longer title, but they ran out of letters. I'm glad to be here with you. Let's go to the next slide, please. This is a quick overview of what I'm covering. Let's go to the next slide. I told you it'd be quick. Next slide. There we go. Look, this is what I always get asked, okay? It doesn't matter where I go. People want to know, what exactly is an access or functional need? So I thought that might be a good place to begin the day. AFN, as I'll refer to it, is an individual who's got either developmental or intellectual disability, physical disability, chronic conditions, injuries, limited English proficiency, older adults, children, people in institutionalized settings, those who are homeless, transportation disadvantaged, or pregnant women. It's a pretty broad umbrella. And in a state with about 40 million people, you can imagine that makes up a pretty good chunk of folks. Then the second question I get asked, next slide, is how do we integrate AFN into emergency planning? I tell folks that we do it together, and I remind them about a story I once heard about a knight riding into town. The knight was coming into town on his horse, and he looked to the side, and on the side of the road was a little bird. And the bird was lying with its feet up in the air, and the knight was puzzled. So he stopped and dismounted and asked the bird, little bird, what are you doing? Why aren't you flying around with your friends? Instead, you're laying here with your little legs up in the air. And the bird said, well, I heard that the sky was going to fall. So I'm lying here with my feet up so I can catch it. And the knight said, that is ridiculous. You are a tiny bird. Your legs are small and feeble and weak. Surely you cannot hold up the sky. And the bird thought about it for a second and looked back at the knight and said, you're right. My legs are tiny and feeble and maybe even weak. But we each do what we can. And so when I say that we integrate access and functional needs together, it's because we each do what we can together to collectively hold up the sky. You see, no two disasters are ever the same. Even disasters that are earthquakes will vary in terms of where they hit, and when, and the intensity, and location, and topography, and all of it. Duration, whatever they hit up on the Richter scale. By the way, I'm going to drop these papers. Don't rush to pick them up. Unless I drop them all, then I'll ask for help. But they vary. And so we find, however, that despite the variance, there is one consistency, that every single time, the most impacted population are those with disabilities and access and functional needs. Every single time. And so to address that, next slide, please. The governor of California created my office, the Office of Access and Functional Needs. And I'm here to integrate the needs of those individuals, folks like myself and others, you and people you know, love and care about, into the way we plan for emergencies, the way we do things before, during, and after a disaster. Well, what does that look like exactly? Next slide. During the fires that ravaged Northern California last year, you heard about these were the 3rd and 7th worst fires in the history of our state. I got a text message early on Sunday morning, 3 words from the State Operations Center: get in here. It's never a great text to have. I'd been on the job, by the way, for 3.5 weeks when this happened. 20 minutes later, I was being briefed in our operations center. And about an hour and a half after that, I was in my van driving into Lake County. Now, if you're familiar with that area, you'll know you come around a bend and the valley just opens up. It's beautiful. But not that day. That day I went around the bend and it looked like a bomb had gone off. Everything was charred. Everything was black. Our lungs started burning from the air that was coming into the van. And the ash literally hung in the air so thick that it darkened out the sun. I felt very much like it was in the scene of a post-apocalyptic movie. Upon getting to the shelter, my job came front and center. There was no accessible parking. Everywhere I looked, there were supply trucks, donations being dropped off, vehicles of every make and model, parked in every configuration you can imagine. What I didn't see was signage. I didn't see exposed curb cuts. I didn't actually have a way to access the shelter without parking illegally to do so, which I did. Now, upon touring the shelter, I discovered that in the rush to get this set up, steps were skipped, missed, or neglected. Not intentionally, but because they hadn't been integrated into the plan. So, navigating the bathroom was more than challenging. I found that out because it was a long drive there and it was the first place I went. TMI. But getting through the rest of the shelter was no piece of cake. The cots were too close together, there was a lot of clutter. And I kept hearing, as I went on this tour of the shelter, about the accessible showers. You're gonna love these accessible showers. They're great, they're built into the facility. They can accommodate a lot of people, which is fantastic. What wasn't fantastic is the tour manager said, and the shelter manager said, come right through this doorway. The shower's on the other side. And I couldn't fit through the doorway. He said, well, what do you mean? Just squeeze through. I said, buddy, not on my thinnest day am I going to get through this non-ADA compliant door. And he stopped, and you ever watch people and you can see the light kind of go off? He's like, well, if you can't make it through, nobody else can either. And I said, now you're getting it. Okay, now you're getting it. This is why I'm here. So let me tell you this. My office does exist to coordinate across the agency. I work with ops and logistics, planning, response, recovery. Okay, that's my role. We include AFN within the state emergency plan, the disaster recovery framework, our flood plan, the El Nino exercises, earthquake catastrophic guidance plans, anything you can think of, okay, tabletop or otherwise. But ultimately, even though we get it into those plans, the success of the integration comes through you. See, I can put it in the plan, but you're the ones that actually integrate it. Now know this, I will support you, encourage you, empower you. I'll bribe you with cookies. I will do whatever I can. But you're the ones that actually do the integration. That's on you and your staff, those whom you influence, those whom you lead. And so in that sense, I literally cannot fulfill my mission without you. We had a very hard time getting accessible showers up at shelters, which may or may not sound like a big deal. It's just a shower. Which is why when I said to one of my colleagues who had worked and put forward a Herculean effort to get the showers up there, I said, thank you, and he looked at me and said, no problem, just doing my job. That's why I stopped. I said, Tim, let me tell you a little bit about what I saw on that first day. I'll tell you about the way that the ash sticks to your skin. It leaves a grime so thick you can wipe it away. I'll tell you about how hot it was, how sweaty. I'll tell you about how the people I talked to had literally been evacuated by a neighbor who picked them up out of their chairs, laid them in the back of a pickup truck, and drove away. Now those people watched their house burn down with their wheelchair inside. And then they went to the shelter. And in that hot, sweaty, grimy, panicked and terrible state, sat on the worst day of their lives in their chair for 3 days before they could get a shower. While everybody that wasn't disabled, that didn't have an AFN, lined up, walked in, and refreshed themselves in the shower that was right next to them. What do you think it felt like for that survivor to finally go into a shower and have that water come pour over them, to cleanse them, to make them feel whole again? What did it feel like for that feeling of being human again, being me again, to come over them, that maybe in that moment they had some hope? Maybe in that moment when they felt like themselves again, maybe they thought, I can do this. I can get through this. We can rebuild. We're going to be okay. So I said, Tim, in that moment, I don't think your job has ever held more meaning. I don't think it's ever meant that much. That's when the first drop of water touched their body. So you weren't just doing your job. You were integrating access and functional needs. And in doing so, you were changing and impacting lives. So where do we start? Let's go to our next slide. Look, there's no silver bullet. But I do encourage people to start with language. If we can go just a couple slides up here. Let's go again. And one more. See, language matters. Words carry meaning. They communicate who we are, what we stand for, what we value, and how we see others. Now, when it comes to the language we use, there are different models. There's the medical model and the social model. Now, the medical model basically takes the assumption that the disabled person needs to be adapted to fit into the world, right? That the problem lies with the individual. So when you see things written from the perspective of the medical model, you're going to see terms like fragile, vulnerable, weak, confined to, wheelchair bound, homebound, suffers from, stricken with. None of these are written from any other place than a place of sincerity. Okay, because we go with what we know. What I'm here to tell you, though, is we can do better. Okay, we can use a social model. Okay, we can look at the world and say, the issue isn't the individual. The issue is that we need to make accommodations like a curb cut. We see a curb cut, and we see a more accessible, free and independent world. Not just for me. How many of you have ever pushed a stroller? Dear Lord, you're looking for those curb cuts all over. So in our plans, we use inclusive language because it's a powerful ingredient for achieving successful outcomes. We use people-first language, all right? We focus on the individual. We use terms that are consistent with the ADA. We use language that's respectful and straightforward. And we avoid certain terms, like special needs, or separate, segregated, words that might be lightning rods. Now, if you use those words, if you said those words, are you a terrible person? No, you're not. And in certain terms, certain circles, maybe that's the term that gets used. What I'm saying is, we put our best good faith foot forward. All right, that's all. And if along the way we discover that the terms we use aren't in the mark, then we evolve. We make adaptions. Okay, that's not a big or hard thing to do. So we move away from, quote, special and focus on what I would say is function. All right? So we need to be cognizant. We've got language. Now, once we've got language, we got to remember we've got to be able to act. Let's go to our next slide. Now, this is one of the questions I get asked all the time. People want to know. They typically do this, right? We'll be in a room, and the emergency managers will open it up for Q&A, and they'll kind of look to their left, and look to the right, and then they'll kind of whisper, how do we avoid getting sued? And I think, that's a great question. You should ask that louder. Or I didn't know it was okay to ask that question. I'm going to tell you what, it's better to ask it now than to wait till some summons shows up on your doorstep. Yeah, that's a good point. Look, it's rare that I come across jurisdictions that deliberately underemphasize the value or need to integrate individuals with disabilities or access and functional needs into the planning process. Okay, that just doesn't happen. What I do find, and I find it on a fairly regular basis, are jurisdictions that want to do the right thing, but they don't know how. And because they don't want to do the wrong thing, they do nothing. Nothing will get you sued faster than doing nothing. Okay, that's how you get sued. I tell people, make a good faith effort. Reach out to your stakeholders. Be inclusive in your planning. I'm less concerned about the speed you're going than I am concerned about what direction you're headed. If you will put forth a good faith effort, if you will have stakeholders that will vouch for the fact that you are actively trying to do the right thing, you will greatly reduce the likelihood that you will be sued or that you will lose in any sort of lawsuit. Look, if you need my help understanding how to integrate these things to a further level, call me and we'll talk about it. And I'll go to bat for you too. Let's go to the next slide. Now, we think about this next part, it's partnerships. The true strength of my office lies in the partnerships. All right, now you might say, access functional needs, what's that? Or I already do that. Or we eat, drink, sleep, whole community planning. We are AFN. And what I'll tell you is this. No matter what your answer, I can respond by saying, great, now let's partner together to do it even better. Because none of us has ever truly arrived, right? We're still working on it. We're a work in progress. And that's good, because it's good work to be a part of. Now, it's through our partnerships that when disasters hit, and especially true during earthquakes, we stand up an AFN stakeholder work group. Okay, we bring in representatives from independent living centers, disability advocacy groups, nonprofits. We bring in individuals with disabilities, those with AFNs. Okay, we bring them in and we tackle things like sheltering, replacing durable medical equipment, looking at assistive technology, and providing acute disaster case management. We work with locals, states, federal stakeholders. And when we do, we're able to ensure that shelters are accessible. We bring in accessible showers, porta potties, hand washing stations. We utilize interpreters at town halls and press events. We provide accessible transportation to and from shelters and LACs. We deliver powered chairs, manual wheelchairs, walkers, canes, rollators, all kinds of assistive technology. Together, as partners, we achieve great things. Next slide, please. Together, we bring an AFN perspective to the Great Shakeout Drill. All right, the largest earthquake preparedness event in the world. We get together annually to learn about earthquake safety. As a part of that, we work with our friends, like the Earthquake Country Alliance, Seniors and People with Disabilities, statewide committee, to draw from across sectors and across the state, and who've done a great work providing resources for modifying drop, cover, and hold on. It's pretty important. It's a good thing. Together, we develop informative videos, we collaborate, we exercise, we work together. Next slide, please. As we move forward, let's remember what we talked about today. We must learn from previous disasters. We got to do it better. We got to improve. And we will improve. But it takes a commitment on my part, on your part, to do it together. In closing, I just want to share a quick story with you. Experience happened to me in college. I was coming back from a date. Now, if my wife hears this story, I always say, I was hanging out with friends. But she's not here. So it was a date. It's a hot date. We'd gone to a midnight show. And I remember I dropped my dad off at her dorm. And I was coming across campus by myself in my wheelchair. And I was headed to my dorm. And on the way, I came across this part of the sidewalk that had been dug up. I think they were working on a pipe. And they'd filled it with dirt. They hadn't paved over the top. And I remember thinking, I should probably go around that. And there was a path to go around. But for whatever reason, there was this voice inside my head. I was like, you should go over that. I'll bet you can make it. And I thought, could I? Yeah, well, let's try it out. Let's give it a go. And I remember being right up on the edge. and thinking, this is not a good idea. Then a little voice said, don't be a chicken, go for it. And I went for it. Now, you ever seen America's Funniest Home Videos? Thought I would have won $10,000 that day. Because I went forward and I sunk like a brick. And I went forward and I got deeper. And I tried to back up and I got deeper. And finally I was like, oh my gosh, stop moving, Taylor. You're not a monster truck, you're a wheelchair. So I'm alone, past midnight, secluded part of campus, without a cell phone. Great. So it's going to be a long night. I look over to my left, and there was a guy leaving the parking lot. I think he was probably the last member of the janitorial crew. And I thought, well, this is my only shot. Hey, hey, hey! And I started yelling out. And he slowed down, he rolled down his window, put his arm out, and went, hey, rolled the window up and took off. I was like, why would I be so enthusiastic to say hi to this guy after midnight? Man, I look for that guy on campus all the time, never found him. So he took off, and I thought, well, I'm just going to go to sleep. I'll wake up in the morning, somebody will be here, and it'll help me out. I went to put my head down, and as I did, I looked out and saw this couple out for a midnight stroll. I was like, sweet. So I called out, hey, hey. And they waved, hey, and then went on their way. And I went, not this time. Help. And they came over. And as they started walking towards me, I realized Lady Luck was back on my side. Because this guy got bigger and bigger and bigger with every step. And I kid you not, I promise this is true. He was a 6'4" German named Klaus. How perfect is that? And he had this like Terminator-like accent. And guys, I'll try it, but it's pretty bad. He looked down, he's like, what is the problem? I was like, well, Klaus, I'm stuck. And he goes, I will get you out. And I looked at his girlfriend, and she looked at him, and she was like, that's my man. So I'm getting ready to say, hey, Klaus, wheelchair's really heavy. And, you know, I'm really buff, and muscle's heavy too, so be careful when you're pulling on the chair. I don't want you to throw out your back. Before I can get it out, Klaus reaches over, grabs my chair, and just lifts it out like it was light as a feather. Like this dude had been training in the wheelchair lifting Olympics and getting ready for a gold medal. And he goes, you are okay now. I was like, you know what, buddy? I am okay now. I need to keep you around. So I figured, look, Klaus and his girlfriend probably have other things to do than hang out with me, so I'm just going to be grateful I'm out and go on my way, and I did. But I think about that story, and I tell it today for a reason. You see, sometimes in life, we drive ourselves in the mud, right? We're supposed to prepare. We're supposed to have a plan. I'm supposed to know how to evacuate. I'm supposed to have a go bag. I'm supposed to know about my medicines and what doctor's info I should keep with me. I'm supposed to be ready because an earthquake is a no-notice event. Sometimes I don't do that. And in that sense, I drive myself in the mud. And I'm stuck. And I need help. Other times, despite our best intentions, our best efforts, we get pushed in the mud. Individuals with disabilities and access and functional needs, as a community, we sit in this sense, shoulder to shoulder. And you are our Klaus. And we're stuck. Our needs need to be integrated. I need for you to look and say, when it all hits the fan, I will get you out. And as you do that, as you lean over and grab hold, as you lift us and elevate us to safety, I believe we raise each other. I believe our communities will be stronger. Our states will be more resilient. Our preparedness that much further along. And I believe that there's a part of that that makes us better, not just better planners and emergency managers and organizers, but better people. Because you take care of me and I take care of you. And together we win the day. And that's my message. And that's my hope. That we might do that together. And we might be safer, more prepared. That we might do what the governor, that my boss liked to say, which is build a safer, more resilient California, and in this case, nation. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you for inviting me to be here. It was wonderful. Thank you.